Ich beginne dann mal damit, nochmal zu sagen, wer hier sitzt. Joan Grossman haben wir vorhin schon kurz vorgestellt. Wir werden gleich noch eine Menge über sie erfahren und über das, wie es zu diesem Film gekommen ist. Wie ich schon angekündigt habe, schalte ich jetzt immer auf Englisch. There sits, and I try to find the name, Philipp Wallmeier. Yeah. And Philipp Wallmeier is from the university, who is running, one of those who runs this project, where you have seen 2 films now. The 3rd film, which comes on the 2nd of May, Une Révolution africaine. It's a French film. We will discuss about that a little bit later also, what it might be about. My first question now, which probably all of you interests also, how does somebody come to start such a film? It is amazing, and Joan will tell us something about it.
Guten Abend. Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank the Naxos.Kino and the university, and Andrej and Philip and everyone for having me here. I started the movie because a friend of mine who's a writer had been working on a book about Drop City, and when he was working on the book, which he was working on in the 1990s, there was still a lot of bad feelings about the way it ended. As you saw, it didn't end very well, and people weren't ready to talk about it. But then, after a number of years, Gene Bernofsky, he's the character who's rowing in the canoe, sent Tom a lot of photographs from Drop City. And he showed me the photographs of the domes, and he said, do you think this would make a good film? And I thought the buildings just looked spectacular. So I was just immediately on a visual level, I was just drawn to the material. And I've had a very long-term fascination and love for the counterculture and for the 1960s, and also, to be honest, I had spent about 10 years working on some very difficult projects about war and genocide and very heavy, difficult stories, and this seemed like it would just be a real pleasure to work on. So that's how it started.
And now we have this wonderful combination of a filmmaker and a scientist, a sociologist, who works at the university, especially about land communes, besides other things. And you should tell us how you came to follow up the story, to get to this film, to bring it into your series of very exciting and interesting and important films, which we are still going to see next.
Yeah, thanks. How did I find the movie? That's actually, I started looking at communes or communities, communal living today, and I wondered, where do these ideas all come from? And so that's when I started tracing back the history of communal living. Sometimes it's called co-housing, in German it's gemeinschaftliches Wohnen. And so when you trace back the history, at some point you see that there was this huge explosion of communes in the late 60s, and they more or less go back to Drop City and a few others that arrived at the same time. So Drop City is one of the very, very, very first communes of the counterculture that had this spirit that I think we still find in communes today, and in some projects that are called gemeinschaftliches Wohnen. So that's how I came across Drop City. And then I started doing research on the topic because there's not so much literature, and I found the movie. And Mike, who is my colleague and friend who is organizing, or who is work organizing this film series for the university. We sometimes go running together, and I told him about the movie, and so that's how the movie ended up on this film series. And I think it's a particularly interesting example of protest and resistance, because people do not go to the streets, they do not try to take power, they rather in a way withdraw from society, they go out of society, try to do something differently. And that's an aspect of protest, of resistance that we usually don't study. We usually study the more visible, the mass protest. And so I think that's what makes it interesting.
Drop City seems to be the beginning of a movement which became very large afterwards. We know very little about these movements in the United States. Is there a Green Party? Are there people, what is the German word, Trotz, instead, Trump, who want to go on with ecology? Can you tell us something about that?
We do have a little tiny Green Party. Unfortunately, it's small. But there's a very large and growing environmental movement in the United States. And especially given the current political situation, when we have a science denier in the White House, I think that is really galvanizing a lot of energy toward green living, efficiency. You know, I think all the things that Drop City was experimenting with are, you know, at the core of what the green movement or the environmental movement is also still trying to understand. You know, how, you know, questioning values, I think, is the, you know, the real essence to me of the movie, is asking how we live and how can we live in a way that really is meaningful to our better selves, you know, our better natures, our creative nature, you know, our nature of sharing and being resourceful. So that, to me, is the essence of it. I mean, obviously, there's a need to respond now, you know, to what's going on with the environment. I feel it's a very urgent problem, and you know, the United States has a huge problem, like most of the world, with money controlling things more than people. So, you know, can we win this one? We'll see. We'll find out. But I've noticed, one thing I've noticed with the film, and since I finished it in 2012, is it seems to, in some ways, get more relevant. I think the more urgent the current situation is, I think people respond pretty strongly to the film, and I've noticed it especially when I show it at universities with younger people. I think they're afraid of the future, and there's a real, there's something encouraging and inspiring about this. So yeah, as far as, you know, in the United States, I think we have, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, obviously.
On the other hand, this film also shows very clearly it came to an end. It didn't succeed in a way, but it was the starting point for a new way of thinking, to try to find new ways of living. And here I'm again interested in what Philip says, because he's working on this subject. You have just been in Berlin giving a thesis there with a certain word which you use, who these people are. You know what word I mean? I look it up in your writing otherwise. I give you the microphone. Try to explain.
And it's also a difficult role to be the expert, the scientist, the expert here. I mean, I often, when I talk about the topic, I feel more like a participant. So accept my opinion here as you know, a person speaking about what he has found out among, you know, many scientists. I think the ideas that came up in the 60s, and that's your question, Andrej.
Just to help you, it is the Anthropocene you are explaining, and maybe it's very interesting to hear a little bit more about that.
Right. So I think many of the ideas that we saw that came up in Drop City and in the counterculture during these years are becoming more and more relevant, like Joan said today. And I think maybe one of these concepts, and I tried to write a paper about this, is one of the concepts is the Anthropocene, which is the idea that man is the driving force behind changes in the surface of the earth, so that actually we are the most potent force today. And I think parts of these ideas were already developed in the counterculture in California, but also they can be traced back at least to I'm not sure about Drop City, but to these circles, to these early communes where, and you saw the whole Earth catalog, right, in the movie, which developed, which is Spaceship Earth is an idea of Buckminster Fuller, the idea of the blue planet that you see from far away, right? This is the time when mankind first discovered that the Earth is one living thing, that it's one thing that can be destroyed. And so these are the ideas that are coming back to us today, I think, in concepts like the Anthropocene, planetary boundaries, and so on. So I feel that many of these ideas that we're dealing with and the problems are similar, but we learn something from these experiments and research centers. You could even call them that.
For my last question to both of you, first to Joan, a follow-up of this movement. Can you say a little bit concrete what your experience is? Who are the people who do similar things today? There was a movement of 500,000 up to 1 million who lived in land communes. Are they still there?
There are some land communes in the United States. There's actually, you can go online and there's a huge kind of co-housing portal, and you can connect with all kinds of people who are living, experimenting. You know, it's still an experiment. I think the human race is still an experiment of can we survive in a productive way in environments where there's so many things that are undermining that survival. So, you know, these are clearly ongoing questions. You know, what's possible. You know, for me, the thing that was important about Drop City was not so much, you know, they didn't know that they were at the beginning of a communalist movement. They were young and they were trying something, just experimenting. But what I love about what they did, you know, in terms of, say, experimenting with geometry and solar energy and thinking about the economy of what they were doing, is that it points to some of the real deep thinking of the counterculture, because I think often the counterculture is a cliche of sex and drugs and rock and roll, which is all great too, but I think there's also was this very rich level of thinking about what is possible. How do we try something different? And with Drop City, they were escaping all of this materialism of the post-World War II era of the United States, and they were escaping the warmongering that was manifest in the Vietnam War, and saying, how can we do it differently? And really, you know, having the opportunity to do that at a time when life was cheaper than it is now. It was easier to buy land for almost nothing. It was easier to build buildings without somebody telling you, oh, you know, you got to have this inspected by 30 different people and pay all these fees. And so, you know, there was an opportunity to experiment. And to me, that's the lasting value of the Drop City story, is that, you know, we need to be inspired to experiment with how we live and how we can do it better and how we can do it in ways that are actually meaningful and satisfying. It's not just a question of, say, surviving without joy. That's also, I think, a real lesson of Drop City, to find joy in the process of survival. So that's how I would frame it. Oh.
Philip, would you like to add something, or shall we turn over to... I think you can add something to what Joan said. You look also like that. And then we come over and collect some questions.
I can just add some brief words. So, I mean, there are projects today that are trying to live communally, to live in more communally, to live in community, and so there are different words to describe that. And Birgit, who sits here, she asked me before, she's part of the network in Frankfurt for communal living, basically. So she asked me before if such a question arises, I should point to her, so if you have questions about communal living today, you can ask her. And I myself am involved in a project where we try to live more communally. But there are also obviously more communes in the sense where, you know, you share everything you own that exists in Germany, also in the United States. And there are different kinds all over the place. I think if you look carefully, you will find that communal living is not a thing of the 60s, but it's a thing of today, really.
Okay, and now he comes with the microphone. Jetzt kommt und sammelt Fragen ein. Nochmal der Hinweis, richtig in die Mitte vom Mikrofon hineinsprechen, sonst so hört man zum Beispiel kaum irgendwas. Geht so nicht. So.